of his redacted report that assesses the subject of all those headlines, that assesses the potential criminal liability for the president, specifically on the issue of obstruction of justice. One of the things we got is a really specific, factual account of multiple instances of the president's behavior that might fall under the rubric of obstruction of justice. And it's all stuff that is based on sworn statements and evidence. We've got references to exactly where they got all of the evidence that they got that supports the narrative that they laid out. We get full names of the people who provided them with that evidence. We get places, we get times, we get any corroborating evidence, we get dates for everything. It's like a full-blown receipt, an itemized receipt for exactly what happened. And we get that on all of them. I mean, just pick your favorite here. I mean, there are 10 broad categories of obstruction of justice by the president that are described in Volume 2 of Mueller's report. Each of those 10 broad categories has multiple components and multiple acts by the president. I mean, just pick one. I mean, here, I'll show you what I mean about the details here. In the table of contents, this is just picking one almost at random. This is the first item under the heading, the president's efforts to curtail the special counsel investigation. You see there, subsection 1. The president asks Corey Lewandowski to deliver a message to Attorney General Jeff Sessions to curtail the special counsel investigation. I mean, I could have picked any of these. Literally, just the table of contents for the president's obstruction of justice actions is 30 pages long, single-spaced, small font. But I like this. I like this example in particular, not because it's the best one or it's the worst one, but because this one I like because in the middle of the narrative in this one, the detailed narrative of this one, you can tell there's this moment where the president thinks he has come up with a genius idea. Eureka! He has a capital I idea that will solve everything. And it basically leaps off the page that the president thinks he has nailed this one. Here's how the account of this one starts. Quote, on June 19th, 2017, the president met one-on-one in the Oval Office with his former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. Senior White House advisors described Lewandowski as a devotee of the president and said the relationship between the president and Lewandowski was close. During that June 19th, 2017 meeting, Lewandowski recalled that after some small talk, the president brought up Jeff Sessions and criticized his recusal from the Russia investigation. The president then asked Lewandowski to deliver a message to Sessions and said, quote, write this down. This was the first time the president had asked Mr. Lewandowski to take dictation. And Lewandowski wrote as fast as possible to make sure he captured the content correctly. So here's the president having a brainwave. He has come up with something that will solve the Jeff Sessions being recused from the Russia investigation thing once and for all. Corey, write this down. Corey, write this down. Get a pen. Bite off the tip of your finger and write it in blood. I just had a thought. Get this down. I got something here. Quote, the president directed that Sessions should give a speech publicly announcing, I know that I recused myself from certain things having to do with specific areas, but our POTUS, our president of the United States, is being treated very unfairly. He shouldn't have a special prosecutor / counsel because he hasn't done anything wrong. I was on the campaign with him for 9 months. There were no Russians involved with him. I know it for a fact because I was there. He didn't do anything wrong except he ran the greatest campaign in American history. So that's the speech that Jeff Sessions is supposed to give. Mueller says, quote, the dictated message went on to state that Sessions would meet with the special counsel to limit his jurisdiction to future election interference. Now a group of people, this is what, again, Sessions is supposed to say, now a group of people want to subvert the Constitution of the United States. I am going to meet with the special prosecutor to explain this is very unfair and let the special prosecutor move forward with investigating election meddling for future elections so that nothing can happen in future elections. Aha! See? You can just see, like, the president thinking this out. Like, you can see the smoke coming out of his ears. You can almost smell it, right? I mean, you can see him thinking, this is not firing the special counsel. 2 days before this meeting with Corey Lewandowski, 2 days previous to that meeting, he had told White House counsel Don McGahn that Don McGahn should fire Robert Mueller, should fire the White House special counsel. That's detailed in here, too. Don McGahn refused that demand from the president, said he would quit. It was a big pain in the neck. But this, you can see the president thinking his way through this. This is genius. What he'll arrange through Corey Lewandowski, private citizen at this point, no role in the administration whatsoever, he'll arrange it through Corey Lewandowski. He loves Corey. He will arrange that the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, will unrecuse himself from the Russia investigation. He will rescind his recusal. And then, once he's unrecused, Jeff Sessions won't fire Mueller. Now he knows that would be a problem. Instead, Jeff Sessions will just tell Mueller, hey, from here on out, I'm redirecting your investigation. So from here on out, it's only about crimes in the future. You, Robert Mueller, you have to leave all the crimes in the past alone. You're so unfair. You can only investigate future crime from here on out. Quote.
Dude, you got some badass mic problems.
He would be the most popular guy in the country. Corey Lewandowski told the president he understood what the president wanted Sessions to do. Write this down, Corey. I've got a great idea. The redacted report then goes on to explain that Corey Lewandowski, in fact, doesn't go deliver this message to Jeff Sessions. He tries. He makes an appointment with Jeff Sessions, but Jeff Sessions cancels, and then Lewandowski doesn't really know what to do, so he puts the thing that he dictated from Trump in a safe. One thing we learn in this report is that lots of people around President Trump not only have safes at home, they use them whenever the president asks them to do something that really seems illegal. But after Corey Lewandowski doesn't give the message to Jeff Sessions and instead gives the message to a locked safe, the president asks Lewandowski again, calls him back in for another one-on-one meeting. Did you tell Sessions? They have another meeting in the Oval Office where the president asks Corey Lewandowski to deliver this message to Sessions again, or else.
What is it called again?
And the or else here is similarly genius. Back to the report. In the follow-up meeting, quote, in the July 19th meeting with Lewandowski, the president raised his previous request and asked if Lewandowski had talked to Sessions. Lewandowski told the president that the message would be delivered soon. Soon, boss, soon. Lewandowski recalled that the president then told him that if Sessions did not meet with him, Lewandowski should tell Sessions that he was fired. So you go meet with the Attorney General, you give him this message from the president that tells the Attorney General that he needs to unrecuse himself. He needs to give a speech about how terrible the special counsel is and about how Donald Trump ran the greatest presidential campaign in history. And then he needs to announce that now that he's unrecused, he's changing the mandate of the special counsel. So from here on out, Robert Mueller can only investigate any crimes that are going to take place in the future, nothing that already happened. And, Corey, if Jeff Sessions won't meet with you to receive this message about what he's going to do, well, then you, Corey, you fire him. You, political consultant who used to work for my campaign, who is now just a random private citizen, you fire the Attorney General. You say, I, Corey Lewandowski, fire you. This is how it's going to work, right? Genius plan. After that point, more hilarity ensues, including Corey Lewandowski then trying to make someone else do this. He tapped somebody else to give this message to Jeff Sessions about what Sessions is supposed to do. He tells the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, Rick Dearborn, to do it. Mr. Dearborn does not do it. But then, I mean, we get all of this very specific narrative of when and how that all happened and how we know that all happened. You know, we get the date of the first demand from the president. Hey, Corey, write this down. That's June 19th, 2017. We get the date of the president meeting with Lewandowski again to reiterate the demand and to say the backup plan, if this doesn't work, is the Attorney General being fired by a random citizen. That's July 19th, 2017. We get footnote after footnote after footnote in this section of the report saying exactly which FBI interview on which date and at which page of the FBI's record of that interview Corey Lewandowski provided this information to the investigation. Also, Rick Dearborn, too, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, the guy who Corey Lewandowski tried to hand off this cockamamie plan to. We get all of these details, including specific references to their FBI interviews and the 302s, the 302 forms which the FBI used to memorialize those interviews. And then we get, I mean, as cockamamie as this was, as ridiculous as this was as a scheme, we then get Mueller and his team, in all seriousness, explaining how you would charge something like this as a crime. And they do this for all of these instances of potential criminal obstruction by the president. Under the heading analysis, in analyzing the president's efforts to have Lewandowski deliver a message directing Sessions to publicly announce that the special counsel investigation would be confined to future election interference, the following evidence is relevant to the elements of obstruction of justice. And then the first discussion is of the obstructive act. What constitutes the obstructive act? There's a long discussion of all of the elements of what the president did exactly, concluding, quote, the president's directives indicate that Sessions was being instructed to tell the special counsel to end the existing investigation into the president and his campaign. Then the next element of obstruction of justice as a criminal matter is nexus to an official proceeding, which you have to show if you're going to prove this is criminal obstruction of justice. In this case, they're very blunt, and they say, yes, there is a nexus to an official proceeding. Quote, by the time of the president's initial one-on-one meeting with Lewandowski on June 19th, 2017, the existence of a grand jury investigation supervised by the special counsel was public knowledge. So that's the nexus to an official proceeding. And then there's one last element. There's the third element you need to establish criminal obstruction of justice, and that is intent. Quote, substantial evidence indicates that the president's efforts to have Sessions limit the scope of the special counsel's investigation to future election interference was intended to prevent further investigative scrutiny of the president's and his campaign's conduct. The president knew that the Russia investigation was focused in part on his campaign, and he perceived allegations of Russian interference to cast doubt on the legitimacy of his election. The president further knew that the investigation had broadened to include his own conduct and whether he had obstructed justice. Those investigations would not proceed if the special counsel's jurisdiction were limited to future election interference only. I mean, which is obvious as a logical matter, right? You and me, we're not lawyers just looking at this stuff. Like, yeah, duh. If you can only, if the investigator is now only allowed to investigate stuff that hasn't happened yet, right? I mean, it seems obvious, but you're spelling out intent here for why an alleged perpetrator could be charged or should be convicted of this as a crime. And as such, you belabor the point. You spell it all out. Quote, the manner in which the president acted provides additional evidence of his intent. Rather than rely on official channels, the president met with Lewandowski alone in the Oval Office. The president selected a loyal devotee outside the White House to deliver the message, supporting an inference that he was working outside White House channels, including that of White House counsel Don McGahn, who had just 2 days previously resisted contacting the Justice Department about the special counsel. The president also did not contact Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, the acting Attorney General, on the Russia matter, who had just testified publicly that there was no cause to remove the special counsel. Instead, the president tried to use Jeff Sessions to restrict and redirect the special counsel's investigation when Sessions was recused and could not properly take any action on it. Quote, the July 19th, 2017 events, the second meeting, provide further evidence of the president's intent. The president followed up with Lewandowski in a separate one-on-one meeting 1 month after he first dictated the message for Sessions, demonstrating that he still sought to pursue the request. You do not need this level of detail. You do not need this much chapter and verse on intent. And all of this overt spelling out of the 3 elements that constitute criminal obstruction of justice, right? Obstructive act, nexus to an official proceeding, intent. You don't need all of that if you're just trying to inform the public about what the president's like behind closed doors or how this plot unfolded. I mean, you certainly don't lay all that out in order to show that the president definitely didn't obstruct justice here. I mean, this is laid out to show that he did, and to lay it out specifically as a predicate for criminal charges. This is laid out so that this can be charged. And it's not brought here in this report in the form of actual criminal charges being unveiled against the president. There is no accompanying indictment that goes along with this, right? And Mueller spells out why, right? Mueller explains explicitly in his redacted report that he is bound by Justice Department policy that does not allow for the indictment or prosecution of the president, and so therefore he could not bring charges. he couldn't bring a prosecution. He couldn't say explicitly, here, this is a crime, because if the president can't be hauled into court to face charges, he can't avail himself of the court either to prove his innocence. And so instead, we get this roadmap from Mueller, explaining in detail precisely what the president did and the evidence that proves it, the admissible evidence that proves it, and how it fits every element you need to prove under the criminal law in order to support a criminal charge of obstruction of justice for this type of behavior. About which former Attorney General Eric Holder was quite blunt today. Looking at this evidence and the way that Mueller laid this out, this is what Holder said today, quote, any, all caps, any competent public corruption prosecutor would bring obstruction charges against Trump and win. Only reason Mueller did not was because of the flawed Justice Department restriction against indicting a sitting president. Well, flawed or not, that is the Justice Department policy. Mueller felt bound by it. And so now, instead of an indictment of the president, we've got his roadmap for how one might prosecute this behavior by President Trump. But who's supposed to follow this map? Why lay it out like this with all of the different elements that you need to show in order to bring charges?
님 VR이군요. VR
Not just
얼마예요?
the factual record, but how it fits
전
the
VR 사고
statute.
싶은데 비싸서 못
Who's this
사요.
roadmap for? Mueller explicitly raises two possibilities.
마이크 없어요?
And it's funny, only one of these is being discussed in the wake of the report. But in the report, there's very
아,
clearly there's two.
아직 표정을 잘 몰라서
The one
무슨
that
표정을
nobody's
해야 될지
talking about
모르겠네.
is from page 1 of the obstruction section of the report. It's explicit. It's not even legalese. While the OLC opinion, this Justice Department opinion, concludes that a sitting president may not be prosecuted, it recognizes that a criminal investigation during the president's term is permissible. An investigation during the president's term is permissible. The OLC opinion also recognizes that a president does not have immunity after he leaves office. And then there's a footnote just to put the second exclamation point on that, citing the OLC memo that says you can't bring charges against a sitting president, but quoting this exact part of it. Quote, recognizing an immunity from prosecution for a sitting president would not preclude such prosecution once the president's term is over. And this is something nobody is talking about in the wake of the Mueller report. At least nobody's broadly talking about it. But this is why Mueller says he did his report this way, right? If you uncover crimes, but there can be no charges, why bother uncovering the crimes, right? Well, he says because the immunity that prevents the perp from being charged in this case, that's a fleeting thing. That doesn't last forever. And so it's not only worth investigating, it's worth laying down what looks like chargeable conduct here and why. As Mueller says it, quote, given those considerations, the facts known to us, and the strong public interest in safeguarding the integrity of the criminal justice system, we conducted a thorough factual investigation in order to preserve the evidence when memories were fresh and documentary materials were available. Why are you preserving the evidence? Preserving it for whom? Here's your roadmap. Because, as Mueller says explicitly, when Donald Trump is no longer president, there's no restriction on charging him. And here's how you do it on these charges. By the way, the statute of limitations on obstruction of justice is 5 years. 5 years from the last criminal act that could be charged. So how long would prosecutors have here? How long does the president have to make sure he stays in office to avoid these potential charges? Well, I mean, we get a lot of details, including a lot of specific dates
Do you want to draw
in this narrative.
together?
It's not just a book about the presidency, it's receipts.
draw,
Right? So the president directs KT McFarland to write an email swearing that Trump didn't tell Mike Flynn to call the Russian government about sanctions. That was on February 23rd, 2017. Add 5 years, okay, statute of limitations there extends to February 23rd, 2022.
FPS is like 20.
The president personally directed that a public statement about the Trump Tower meeting delete a proposed line that acknowledged that Don Jr. expected at that meeting to obtain information helpful to the Trump campaign.
Oopsie-doopsie.
That, we know from the
Yeah.
Mueller report, was July 8th, 2017. When would the statute of limitations expire
Fuck
on
you.
that? Add 5 years, July 8th, 2022. The president cleared everyone except James Comey out of the Oval Office
You
before
fake
asking Comey, I
Uganda
hope you can
knuckle.
see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn
time
go.
a
He's a
banana.
good guy. I hope you can let this go. That was on February 14th, 2019. Excuse me, 2017. Statute of limitations expires on that one, February 14th, 2022. Happy Valentine's Day. The president called Don McGahn and directed him to contact Attorney General Jeff Sessions and have him relay the message that Special Counsel Mueller had conflicts of interest and must be removed. That was June 17th, 2017. Add 5 years, statute of limitations expires June 17th, 2022. The president met with Corey Lewandowski and dictated a message for him to give to Sessions, saying that Sessions should publicly announce the investigation was very unfair to the president. And from then on, the special counsel should only move forward investigating election meddling for future elections. That initial meeting was June 19th, 2017.
Oh, Christ.
Then there was a follow-up meeting a month later, July.
Can you hear?
So July 2017, add 5 years.
Would you mind if I invite you to another one? Because this one's
July
dying on me.
2022.
Yep, do
The
it.
special counsel
Me
laid
too,
out the
about to ask
obstructive
you the
act,
same thing.
the nexus to an official proceeding, and the evidence for intent on all of these. If President Trump is not reelected, he will be out of office in January 2021. At that point, he will no longer be immune from prosecution. He will still be well within the statute of limitations on all of the alleged felony counts of criminal obstruction of justice that are laid out in this report. Those don't expire for more than a year after he leaves office. If he is reelected, he will definitely still be in office while the statute of limitations on all those potential crimes expires and he can no longer be prosecuted for them. How's that for a re-election bumper sticker, right? 4 more years, 4 more years, so he can run out the statute of limitations on multiple felony charges over and above the one where they named him individual 1 and SDNY on 2 campaign finance felonies already. 4 more years for that. That'll fit. I mean, they'll make it rhyme. They'll fit it on a hat. Of course, in the United States, we have never had a situation where a president left office and then was charged with crimes he committed while being president. Ford pardoned Nixon as soon as Ford was sworn into office, so we never got to test that when it came to Nixon. One of the senior Watergate prosecutors resigned in protest that day. Bill Clinton entered into a non-prosecution agreement with the successor to Ken Starr on his final day in office as president, to avoid being charged with lying to investigators about his extramarital affair. They were actively working with a grand jury to consider indicting Bill Clinton as soon as he left office for lying to investigators about his affair. On his last day in office, they came to a deal, a non-prosecution deal. He would not be charged once he was no longer president, but he had to pay a $25,000 fine and give up his law license for 5 years. That deal was announced on his last day in office. So we have been very close to charging ex-presidents with crimes they allegedly committed while in office as president. But so far, we haven't got there. Robert Mueller, however, has laid out a 182-page path for doing just that, even just on obstruction of justice. Unless, of course, President Trump is going to face the music on this stuff the other way, that is laid out in the Constitution, that is envisioned by the Justice Department regulations that prohibit him being charged while he is a sitting president. The other way that is laid out elegantly in Mueller's report in the introduction to the obstruction section. Quote, the conclusion that Congress may apply the obstruction laws to the president's corrupt exercise of the powers of office accords with our constitutional system of checks and balances and the principle that no person is above the law. That, of course, is about impeachment, right? That's the other way the president could be effectively prosecuted for these alleged crimes using the roadmap and using the evidence laid out by Robert Mueller in this report. That remedy, the impeachment remedy, is broadly viewed as politically impossible, not least of which because Democrats don't want to go there. Maybe. Today, that started to change, and in one way in particular, that could end up being a very big deal. And that is the subject of our next segment and our next interview. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
gotta fight.
A new phase of the 2020 presidential campaign and an important new phase of the response to the redacted Mueller report began this afternoon at 4:05 p.m. Eastern, and this was a surprise. Quote, the Mueller report lays out facts showing that a hostile foreign government attacked our 2016 election to help Donald Trump, and Donald Trump welcomed that help. Once elected, Donald Trump obstructed the investigation into that attack. Mueller put the next step in the hands of Congress. Quote, Congress has authority to prohibit a president's corrupt use of his authority in order to protect the integrity of the administration of justice. The correct process for exercising that authority is impeachment. To ignore a president's repeated efforts to obstruct an investigation into his own disloyal behavior would inflict great and lasting damage on this country. And it would suggest that both the current and future presidents would be free to abuse their power in similar ways. The severity of this misconduct demands that elected officials in both parties set aside political considerations and do their constitutional duty. That means the House should initiate impeachment proceedings against the President of the United States. Signed, Elizabeth Warren, Senator of Massachusetts, candidate for president in the Democratic primary. Joining us now is Senator Elizabeth Warren, who as of tonight is calling for the impeachment of the president. Senator, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate your time. I know you made time for us on short notice.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
So you are the first Democratic presidential candidate who is calling for the start of impeachment proceedings. Other Democrats have been saying it's not worth the political cost, it's not worth the civic cost, or it's arguably just too soon. What made you decide to take this step today?
Well, I read the report. I was on an airplane yesterday and started reading it, read it way into the night last night, and I got to the end and realized this is about a point of principle. The report is absolutely clear that a foreign government attacked our electoral system to help Donald Trump. He welcomed that help. And then when it was investigated by our own federal authorities, Donald Trump took multiple steps to try to obstruct justice. You know, this is one of those moments when I get it, that there are people who think politically, no, it's going to be too hard to do this. This isn't about politics. This isn't even specifically about Donald Trump himself. It is about what a president of the United States should be able to do and what the role of Congress is in saying, no, a president does not get to come in and stop an investigation about a foreign power that attacked this country or an investigation about his own wrongdoing. Equal justice under law. No one is above the law, and that includes the President of the United States. It is the constitutional responsibility of Congress to follow through on that.
If you had a crystal ball and could see into the future, and you could see that if the argument that you're making carried the day in the House and impeachment proceedings began in the House, there was an investigation in the Judiciary Committee, they referred articles of impeachment to the House voted essentially to indict the president, and then the Senate didn't act, or the Senate voted and decided that the president should not be removed from office on the basis of those articles of impeachment. If you could see into the future and that's how it would go, the House says yes, the Senate says no, would you still think that it was the right thing to do for the country and that it was a worthy use of resources and time?
Yes, I would. I think that each person has to stand up and be counted in a democracy. I think that's why we're elected to the House and to the Senate. And there are